Opinionated, outspoken, informative. The Jaguar Journal. Your source for the latest information on Southern University sports and SWAC athletics. A Baton Rouge sports talk tradition. Now, here's your host, Reggie Flood.
Bright and early on a Saturday morning, 7:05 a.m., the Jaguar Journal. I'm Perry White. I've been doing this show probably for about 4 or 5 years now. It could be longer. I don't know. I lost track. We'll have to update that thing when it comes in. Here's your host, man. That thing been saying Reggie Flood since day one. And we got to get Reggie Flood and Perry White. We got to do something with that. We're going to have to get that updated. CJ, you're going to have to work with me on that one. But good morning to everybody. Hope you guys had a good week. My man Mike is out, so I got my man Casey on the board back here with me this morning. He's going to be working through it. We're going to see how good he is this morning. I got good faith in him. He got us rolling, and we on time. So he's already started out good with me, but my man Mike is out. You know, I like Mike a lot, but Casey rocking and rolling with me this morning, so I appreciate you, Casey. It's bright and early. Sometimes it could be a little bit too early on a Saturday, considering how your Friday is going. And I hope you guys had a good week leading up into today, being able to tune in. For all of you guys, some of you listen to us in the radio at 107.3, but for many, you may be in and out your car, or you may not be able to stick to a radio too long. So if you want to continue to listen to the show from 7 to 9 every Saturday, and as well as while it's live, you can go on the Jaguar Journal you can follow us on Facebook, but you can also go to the Jaguar Journal YouTube channel, type in the Jaguar Journal, subscribe, and you can get on there, and we're live on there, so you can be able to check us out. We are live on the Jaguar Journal YouTube channel, so you get a chance to. And I've been liking it lately because what's been happening, the guys have been in there having the chats. They've been going around with different conversations. People pose questions in there for the show, and we're going to have a heck of a show today. I know that I've always typically skipped baseball, but today, pretty much the majority of today's show is going to be dedicated to baseball. We're going to get Roger Kadar on, former Southern University head baseball coach. We're going to get him on at 7:30. He's been covering the SWAC baseball tournament out in Atlanta, and so give him an opportunity to give us some perspective, especially about Southern. He covered the game yesterday in which Southern was eliminated by Bethune-Cookman, so we'll be able to get a better breakdown of what happened with that game and get a perspective from a coach of what happened. On the other side, the 8 o'clock hour, we're going to get my man Santoria Black and Charles Edmond. Going to get both of them. They've also been covering the game right there with Coach Roger Kadar, but Santoria Black and Charles Edmond, they'll give us some perspectives of the overall tournament, the teams that have been participating. And if you've been watching, the games have been live streamed on the SWAC Digital Network. I've been tuning in, catching games all week. There have been some pretty good ball games being played, and so it has been interesting. You look at the team right now, Grambling has done what they've needed to do. Alabama State has been right there. Bethune-Cookman has found a way to stay alive. They're interesting matchups, and we'll jump more into that once those guys get on here. I don't want to spoil it too much, but trust, I definitely want to talk about Southern baseball as the baseball team season came to an end yesterday. Man, gave up some runs late in the 7th, going into the 8th inning against Bethune-Cookman. It seems Bethune-Cookman kind of just ran away with it after that. That got to be the slowest, has to be the slowest running team, base team I've seen. Man, those guys aren't fast at all, but they can hit. And I guess that's what matters. So we'll talk more about that with Coach Roger Kadar and everything else, man. I've been watching all the graduations, high school graduations around Baton Rouge and around everywhere, man. I've been enjoying seeing the young people celebrate. And, you know, there's an accomplishment when it comes to graduating. And I don't care if you dance, sing, or shout. Do what you do. And I know I've been seeing it all over the internet this week of people been saying, well, why are the kids doing this and why are they doing that? Man, this day and age, let them kids do what they gonna do. Those kids went through the process of an education, they graduated, and they were able to cross that stage, and that means something. I know for a lot of people, we've kind of gotten, you get older, you get a little bit more, less patience about yourself. You get a little bit more heartless about yourself. You start to not really care the way that you used to care because it doesn't really matter to you anymore. But, I've been seeing people criticize, man, forget all that, man. These are kids at the end of the day. And they not doing nothing wrong but dancing, but celebrating, enjoying the fact that they accomplished something that the rest of the world is out there saying that you probably won't accomplish, especially when they look like me. The rest of the world has already said you're probably going to end up dead by killing each other, or you're going to end up in jail because you killed somebody and then you got caught, or you did some other things. But for these kids, accomplishing something with an education behind it matters. It means something. And I'm happy to see it. It has gone viral. I've seen Good Morning America. I've seen it all over the internet. I've seen people say, man, I wish I had this energy when I graduated. Because most people, just walk across stage, hey, how you doing? Grab your diploma, walk on off. That's about it. That's all. It was just like that, just very, if I'm minute. No, man, you got to have some energy. I done put up with these teachers. I done put up with these other kids at school. This sorry lunch they serving every day. I don't know, have y'all seen what they serve kids at lunch these days? I guess not. On top of a pandemic. I could not even imagine being in school when COVID happened. I'm not gonna lie, I enjoy going to school. I looked forward to going to school. My motivation, I always tell people this, and I'll have no problem saying it, was the girls. I went to school because I wanted to see the girls. That was, I don't think I could have ever went to an all-boys school. It just couldn't happen for me. It was no motivation there. You just go see a bunch of guys, you know what I'm saying? And I'm a little older. So, I grew up in the age of still writing those letters. Some of y'all old enough to know what it's like to write a letter to somebody and hand it to them as you walking by, going to one class and they going to another class. And you got somewhere at the bottom of that letter. Yes, no, maybe. Maybe a house number. Because that was one thing to do back in the day. You had to call a house phone and you really got to know people because they like, who your folks? Where y'all from? And then your mom or whoever say, no, I don't like that. I don't like that. But they ain't have no manners when they call the house. But I couldn't imagine have grown up in this era when COVID happened and not been in school and having to learn over, the internet, not interacting. Them kids are excited, man. Them kids have dealt with so much, and to overcome all of that. And a lot of people I just think are selfish when it comes to the moment. Now, I told you 2 weeks ago, I'm sick of all the extra graduations. You don't need the kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade graduation. I had one graduation. That was when I graduated from high school. The rest of them was like, congratulations, you moved to the next grade. I was okay with that. My son, 2 years ago, had a kindergarten graduate. I was in there feeling all sad. They singing 3 little words, and they just doing all of this stuff, man. I'm like, oh, man. Is he done with school forever the way they acting in here? It's an accomplishment, but come on, man. He just finished kindergarten, But had he jigged after he was done completing kindergarten, I would have been okay with it. Congratulations, son. Kindergarten can be rigorous, right? It's hard to have an attention span in kindergarten. Sit down, be quiet, put that down. So, yeah, that's a rant. But I just said, man, leave the kids alone, all right? If they want to jig, if they want to dance, if they want to do whatever, let the kids do it. You know why? They've earned it. They've worked hard. They've accomplished something. And for a lot of people, you may have a lot of accomplishments in your life, but for a lot of these young people, this may be the biggest accomplishment of their life. And you don't take it away by talking about reacting how they react to that accomplishment. This may be the biggest thing that ever happened to them. They may be the first in their family. They may be setting a bar. But regardless of the fact, it's something. And it's something to celebrate, and I commend them. Celebrate. Do your thing. What they say, do your dance. And they did it, and it's gone viral, and I love it. Continue to do what you do. You're not fighting. You're not getting into it. You're dancing. And I don't think nothing's wrong with dancing unless we're going back to watch the old movie Footloose. Y'all remember Footloose? In that little town, you can't dance. Is that where we at these days? You can't dance? I get it's a time and a place, but the time and the place is when I walk across the stage and you shake my hand and you say congratulations. I might cut up. All right, that's my rant on that. I'm going to get back to sports, but I just want to say something about that. Young people, congratulations, and congratulations to everybody in terms, especially the high schoolers who have graduated. Hopefully you're going to Southern University. We'd love to have you jigging selves over there, all right, because we jig at Southern. All right, let's get ready to take a break, Casey. Let's pay some bills, and I hope you guys tune back in. We'll be right back. More of the Jaguar Journal. Back 7:18 a.m. Of course, if you hear that voice right there, that's Tina Turner. She passed away this week. A legend. Beautiful woman. In my head, Angela Bassett is Tina Turner. I should have never saw the movie. Because she's still in my head, Tina Turner. When I look at Tina Turner, I just picture Angela Bassett. She played that role so well. Lawrence Fishburne played that role. I still in my head think he's Ike Turner. I can't unsee it. All right, let's jump into some basketball, NBA. But that is the legend, Tina Turner. She passed away this week. So, if you never seen the movie, you should turn and watch the movie. You'll understand what I'm talking about. Lawrence Fishburne, Angela Bassett. I think that's Ike and Tina. You can't tell me no different. It's not. I don't hear nothing. It must not be. All right. NBA, before I get into everything else, I know you guys have been paying attention to it. You have to have been paying attention. If you have not, you've been under a rock. And I think when you look back at a series in particular, I thought both these conference finals were going to be blowouts, going to be runaways. They looked like they were headed in that direction. You look at the Nuggets, we're up 3-0 over the Lakers. You look on the other side in the Eastern Conference Finals, Miami was up 3-0 over the Boston Celtics. Who would have saw that coming? I didn't think the Lakers was going to make it this far, nor did I think Boston was going to find themselves behind 0-3 to Miami. But you look at what happened with the Nuggets, the Lakers. The Nuggets closed it out. First time in franchise history, they're headed to an NBA Finals. There have been some good Nuggets teams over the years. And particularly, I like the Nuggets during the early years of Carmelo Anthony going there. J.R. Smith used to be on that squad. At one time, Allen Iverson. He told him he didn't want to come off the bench, right? He'd be damned if he was a bench player coming off and think he's going to give him some points. But the Nuggets had their little wave. They had a little wave. It wasn't enough to get them to the finals. But now, closing out the series against the Lakers, just completely sweeping them out the building, 4-0. The Lakers just really could not keep up when you look at offensively what Denver was able to output. 113-111. LeBron James with the ball in his hand as time expires to go up for the shot, to tie it up, and he ultimately doesn't get it. He didn't make a big fuss. He didn't yell and scream for the foul. He just took it, and he kind of just went on about his way. And I think Jokic, when you look at him, you got to put respect on his name. MVP. Here's a guy that has taken the Denver Nuggets to new heights. Scored 30 points in that last game against the Lakers. LeBron James, of course, did everything he could. 40-point performance. That's no easy feat. Anthony Davis, 21 points. They don't have no help from the bench. No help from the bench. But then it bears the questions of what happens now? The Denver Nuggets going on. And Denver has said, you know what, the talks about the Lakers should be over. It's hard when you got a guy named LeBron James that plays for the Lakers, and everything about that organization moving forward is going to be, what is he going to do? Is he coming back? Is he going to take time off? Ultimately, I think what he wants to do is play with his son. Ronnie's going to USC. They're about to be the new show in town. If I was LeBron, I'd take a year off and go travel with my son. You got it like that. The Lakers they ain't that hurt. Then wherever Bronny goes, hey, I'm going. You think they not going to take me? I'm LeBron James. But I think that's what's going to happen with that. It's everybody's question. What's going to happen? Is he going to retire? Is he going to come back? Hey, man, sit down, heal your body. You can't stay young forever. LeBron James still, to me, is better than about 80% of the NBA anyway. At the age that he got drafted in 2002. It's 20-something years ago. And he's still giving you 40 points. I told y'all a couple weeks ago, I'm putting respect on his name. That Michael Jordan, LeBron James talk, I don't like to get in it too much because that is the ultimate barbershop argument. You want to get a barbershop stirred up early in the morning? Bring up LeBron James and put Michael Jordan and have an older generation in there with a younger generation and watch where it go. Somebody in there going to be for Kobe, right? Kobe always going to have his loyal supporters. There's always going to be one for Kobe. But when you get that LeBron and Michael Jordan talk, that'll get the barbershop going for the next 3-4 hours. I'm still going to rock with Michael Jordan, but I got to put respect on LeBron James. That's a bad dude, man. That's a bad dude. And I only talk about it because I don't know if that was the last time I see him. You know, you don't realize something great until it is gone. I said the same thing about Tom Brady. You just been so accustomed to seeing and watching what he's been able to do. But then when it's gone, you look back and you be like, bro, you remember when that dude, Tom Brady, you remember when that dude, LeBron James? The same way we look back and you say, you remember when Michael Jordan? In that moment, we didn't understand it. But once it's gone, it's gone. And then you got to wait some time until that next superstar, megastar, game changer shows up and then disrupts the conversation once again, because it happens in every era. There's going to be somebody next who's going to come through, disrupt, and then in 20 years from now, we're going to ask, are they the greatest? It happens. It cycles. It goes around, comes around. It continues to do that. Every era has someone that was a great, that when they watched, they thought that was the best that ever happened. On the other side, let's look at the Miami Heat. Let's look at the Boston Celtics, man. Miami cannot close this thing out. They allowed going up 3-0. Celtics come back, win 116-99 to get it 3-1. Celtics come back again. That was on Tuesday. Thursday, come back 110-97. It's 3-2. Then tonight, with the series 3-2, can the Heat close it out? Do they have enough to close it out? They don't want this thing to go 3-3. Because then guess what? It goes back to Boston. And that's the last place you want to try to close out a game 7. On the road, if you Miami, against the Boston Celtics in Boston, good luck with that. So Jimmy Butler and Miami are going to have to get it done tonight. It's going to be tough. I love what's going on with that series. I think Eric Spoelstra as a head coach has to be given some form of respect. I said it last week. I say it again. What the Miami Heat have embodied in terms of being a tough playing team, being a team. And then you look at Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler has not been a superstar. He wasn't a superstar in high school. He wasn't a superstar in college. He was more of a role player when he first got to the NBA. But to watch him grow and become a leader, even through all of the adversity throughout his career, and to be Jimmy Buckets. Now, that's the difference when they change your name from Jimmy Butler to Jimmy Buckets. That means you're doing something. And Jimmy Buckets been getting buckets. Now, has it been easy? No, it has not. Game 2, he showed out. You look at the last game, 14 points for Jimmy Butler in a 110-97 loss to the Celtics. Then in that first loss to the Celtics of the series, Jimmy Butler in that series, you look at, he was able to put up 29 points. Now, one thing about Jimmy Butler, he has his ups and downs. He is somewhat consistent in that mid-scoring range, the 20s. But it's rare you can get him up to that 40-point plus. And typically when he does, Miami has a good night. He's going to need it tonight. I'm going to be out watching this game. Tip off at 7:30, of course. Boston Celtics, Miami Heat. Game 6, Miami leads the series 3-2. Should be a good one. We got a good show laid up for you guys today. We're going to get ready to take a break here in just a minute. But just to lead you into that, we're going to have my man Roger Kadar, Coach Roger Kadar. Of course, he's in more Hall of Fames than I can count. I don't know anybody in more Hall of Fames than Roger Kadar. So to be able to have him on, that is a lot of perspective, and especially a perspective that he's been covering the SWAC baseball tournament out in Atlanta, Georgia on the SWAC Digital Network. If you've been watching it, you've been hearing him. Charles Edmond, along with Centoria Black, those guys have been the crew of bringing you SWAC baseball all week. We're going to get Centoria Black and Charles Edmond on at 8 o'clock. We're going to break down the entire tournament from game 1 all the way into the 2 games that are being played today, leading up into the championship game that is to be played tomorrow. So there's going to be some great conversation going on. My man, Jeremiah, I know he normally gets in. He said, hey, man, have y'all talked about baseball yet? Jeremiah, the whole show today going to be baseball. You're not going to miss nothing. No matter if you get in at 7:30 or 8:15, my man, you're going to get it. Now, for everybody out there, follow us, the Jaguar Journal. Subscribe on the YouTube channel. Thank you, everybody that's out there listening to 107.3. We're going to talk some baseball as we get ready to take a break. SWAC baseball, the SWAC baseball tournament, of course, being played out in Atlanta, Georgia. Some good ball being played. Southern University eliminated yesterday by Bethune-Cookman. Roger Kadar join me here in just a minute. We'll talk about that game. Get a breakdown on Southern season. What happened? What went wrong? And you guys know my rant. Southern didn't win an out-of-conference game all season, as you like to call the midweek games. I know you got to get your baseball terminology down. They don't say you scored. You got these runs. So I'll be sure I get it correct. But good look, you beat one team, Dillard. I got a problem with that. And we'll see if Coach Roger Kadar got a problem with it, too, as I begin to ask him, what does it mean and what does it matter to win those games as we get ready to take a break. Y'all stay tuned. Come back with me, all right? Go get your coffee. Put the newspaper down. I'm the newspaper today. I read back to you. I read what the paper is saying to you. All right, so we'll be back. Stay tuned. More to Jaguar Journal. Paying some tribute to the great Tina Turner. That high energy. All I can see with this song, that little tassel on the bottom of that dress, shaking all over the place. Want to welcome you guys back to the Jaguar Journal. I'm Perry White. Thank you, everybody that's listening on 107.3 FM here in Baton Rouge, and everybody that's listening all over the world, no matter what device you're listening to. And thank everybody that's watching, of course, on the Jaguar Journal YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe, get the likes up. Thank you guys for tuning in. And I want to thank my man who My man Casey, right there behind the board. He's filling in for Mike. Mike's out today, so Casey's holding it down, doing a great job this morning, Casey. And now, without further ado, of course, he's no stranger to the Jaguar Journal. I want to welcome my man. He's a Hall of Famer. How many fingers I have? I got to start going through my fingers and all the Hall of Fames that he's a part of. But former Southern University head baseball coach and now retired life. My man, Roger Kadar. Good morning.
Tina was rolling on the Arkansas River.
As famous she's probably been on the Arkansas River, the Missouri River, the Mississippi River, the Ohio, all the rivers, Coach.
Well, I know you playing a song. It was close to your heart, so I'm thinking it's the Arkansas River.
I've been on the Arkansas River many days fishing.
I can believe it.
Good morning. How you doing, man?
Morning. Good. I'm doing good, and you?
Doing good, man. I've been paying attention to the SWAC baseball tournament. I've been listening on the SWAC digital network, listening to you, Charles Edmond, and as well as Santoria Black, as you guys been covering the tournament all week. And for you, first of all, I got to ask you, what do you think about Atlanta hosting the SWAC baseball tournament?
I think it's got a chance. The energy level is very high. Now they have to do a little more with promoting. And I've been speaking to the gentleman who is going to spearhead it and giving him ideas, because he and I connected from day one. And he listened and he says, I can make this thing work. We got the resources, the mayor's behind it. We want to make it work. He said, it's just fantastic, the energy level. And the energy level is coming from mainly the FAMU and Alabama State fans and Bethune-Cookman. I am so impressed with the energy level that the fans are bringing there.
And that comes from
black folks don't do the same thing as sporting events with energy. And particularly at baseball game, they usually don't express their emotion. But I'm telling you, man, the games have been so good and so well fought. I think it's helped a lot,
Sound like you've been enjoying it since you've been out there in the ATL.
Yeah, I've been enjoying it. And I need to say that I'm impressed with what the level of competition. And I had a lot of my friends from Major League Baseball was there because, we picking 50 kids from HBCUs to go and play in the first inauguration of the All-Star game in Seattle on the 7th of July. And they were impressed with the level of play. They were impressed. They said, this is really, we're not loaded. We don't have a bunch of pro prospects, but the competition for collegiate, for the amateur kids, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's really been good. I mean, really high level for them, And I've always felt that it was pretty good, but it really kicked in at another level, in my opinion, being here in the tournament.
I like to hear that. I like the sound of the fans engaging. This tournament has been all over the place over the years. I'm talking about literally all over the Southeast. But it seems that it works in a place like Atlanta, which has a huge HBCU alumni base. So you're able to reach fan bases that are typically from HBCUs all over the place, because Atlanta is typically a destination for a lot of people once they graduate to go, because of the opportunities that are there. So to be able to hear the support being there for the tournament, I like to hear that. I saw the support when it was in New Orleans. I liked what I saw there. But to hear Atlanta, because I was a little iffy about it, Coach. I'm not going to lie. When they said Atlanta, I'm like, that's kind of out the footprint. But I understand why Atlanta, somewhere like that, where you have huge HBCU alumni bases that are there that could come out and support. And that was the part I was hoping that, will they support or will they not support? But from what you're saying, they've come out to support.
You have to extend your marketplace. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, Atlanta is a good place to extend it. Where we don't have a HBCU school in the SWAC there, that doesn't matter, because if you put it in the other places other than Baton Rouge, you're not going to get the support with the fan support you got me.
Mm-hmm.
So here you can get fans from all of the schools, and they want to come and see it. And I'm thinking, I'm going to speak with the commissioner, and I want to be on the committee that talks with the city, because I can give him some idea. The gentleman seems to like what I have to say, and I think we can get some things done because I've done it before, you know, and we did it in Montgomery where we had over 15,000 kids in 4 days over there. So it's not that difficult. It takes effort and the unwilling ability to not worry about failure. You're going to fail, but I know I can help make this thing work.
You learn from those failures. Let me ask you about failure. We saw Southern fall yesterday. They failed to get past Bethune-Cookman. Their season come to an end, double elimination. They found themselves in that game. They lost to Grambling and then fell short to Bethune-Cookman. We go through the season. Southern finished the season 23-28, 17-10 in conference. They were 12-6 at home. Away was tough, Coach. 6-16 away from Baton Rouge. On the road, they were 5-6 at neutral sites. Ended the season, of course, 2-game losing streak because you're in the double elimination. You go through the season. They started with the Cactus Jack HBCU Classic, in which you was a part of out there in Houston, Texas, that played at the Houston Astros Stadium. And they won against Jackson State in Grambling. And then again against Texas Southern, started the season 3-game winning streak. Came back, took on the number one team in the morning. One number one team in the nation at the time, Louisiana State University, LSU. They fell short 4-18. Went on to lose to FAMU, Alabama State. Got a victory against Alabama A&M. Now, Coach, this is the part of the season for Southern this year with Coach Crenshaw that I have been very critical of. And, you know, from my perspective, and I have this with you, and I think you and I have had this conversation, the midweek games. I can go through the HBCU games all day, every day, but it's the midweek games that I have had an issue with this program because Southern has only won against a Division I opponent, one midweek game or one out-of-conference game outside of an HBCU in the past 2 years, and that was at the beginning of last year, not this season, but last season when they got played in a 3-game series. They won game 1 against the University of Texas San Antonio. That was the last time Southern has won an out-of-conference or one of those midweek games. Since then, they have not. They won one out-of-conference game this year, but it was against Dillard University, which, you know, that's one of those games where, you know, it's not a Division I opponent. But you lose to LSU 4-18. You lose to McNeese State 3-10. I
get it. You don't need to go to the scores. But
well, I got to go through the scores, Coach, for the people that's out there that's listening because they may not understand where I'm going with it, and then I'm going to bring it full circle.
Okay. Without giving the scores, I know where you're going. So tell them where you're going with it.
I'm going with it because you look at the level of competition. McNeese State, of course, you go to the South Alabama Invitational. It's Iowa, it's Pepperdine, it's South Alabama. Then you take on UNO, Incarnate Word, teams like that. When I look at, then you take on McNeese State again. You got South Alabama back on the schedule. UL. It's just when you get those games are crucial when you look at building your strength as you go through the season, Coach.
I got you. What you want me to tell you. Listen, my thing is I've told Chris and about, you know, midweek games. And I said, you know, you got to be careful when you play all those midweek games like this. And you may not have the pitching staff. You see, and what happens invariably with a lot of coaches, they evaluate their talent level higher than what it really might be. You know what? All the good teams I had, I never over-evaluated my talent. I always thought that we weren't as good as we were. You got me? And it was a cautious thing for me. And so, you know, but I see a lot of people, and it's not just Chris and 80-90% of the coaches you talk to, they always say that they have better players than they really do have. And I know that people are struggling with pitching all over the place. LSU, all of them. They're struggling to find pitchers. And, you know, so.
Yeah, I heard you say it during the tournament. You was talking about being able to pay coaches. You saying if it's going to be one coach you have to pay, it's the pitching coach.
It's a pitching coach. And this is what I said. We have to find a way we give these coaches money to hire a pitching coach because that's the most critical part of the game. You know, so, you know, if they're going to want to compete, you're going to have to make investments. you know, and so I don't know where the conference is in that respect, because they really do have some good head coaches. The quality of play has improved, but the pitching thing, where we could teach you a little more, you know. And if you listen to me talking, I'm saying to them, throw a fastball on the outside and you'll win. You'll win this tournament. If they throw all fastball on the outside corner, they'll win. Whoever does that will win. But I see too many people to a 5'6" kid throwing a curveball inside to a 5'6" kid. You got the best hitter coming on the team, and I saw a guy 3-2 throw a curveball to a 5'6" kid. 3-2 throw and walked him to face the best hitter. That tells me something ain't right there. And and I'm not, listen, I'm criticizing because that's a part of somebody doesn't know exactly what they're doing. Asking kids to do something that they don't do as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a part of you not having the right professional working with the kids. You got me?
You've seen Southern in this tournament. You called both games. What is your evaluation and your takeaway? Especially, they got that first game against Bethune-Cookman, but falling short to Grambling, and ultimately a tough giveaway yesterday late in the game against Bethune-Cookman.
You know, I'm going to go more to the hitting than anything with Southern. That's been an issue all year with them. The people who need to hit didn't hit. And when they had men on bases, they really tightened up really tough with their hitting. You know, O'Neal, Bogus, and our third baseman, I can't think of his name right now. Played third base for Southern. But they didn't hit. They were the upperclassmen, they needed to hit. You know, just better. And people throwing 80, 81 miles per hour, those guys, they got to hurt those guys. You got me?
Mm-hmm.
Because those are not even top echelon pitchers. They're not even in the middle of the pack. Those are the kind of pitchers you got to lay on. And I'm not going to go back to saying what my players would have done, because I coach in a different era. But this is something that they have to take advantage of. But they're trying to do too much. And that happened all year. I watched them play a lot this year, more than any other year. And I saw struggle, just trying to hit late on fastballs, in fastball count. And how do you fix that? You know, it won't be fixed this year. It got to be fixed going forward. If I was Chris on my recruiting, I would go try to find me some bigger kids. Got too many small kids. And, you know, I mean, and people say, oh, you love big boys because you're big. Well, if you got little kids, they better be good. And I played for a coach saying, I'll take a good big man over a good little man any day. That was the philosophy.
No, yeah, I know. Also, as I've heard you through the tournament, you were talking about the outfielders. You saying, you know, they playing so far back, and that's what's been given up as the ball has been dropping in the outfield, giving up some easy plays.
Yeah, well, 85% of the ball's going to be hit in front of you. Why worry about the 15%? You know, they guarding against the 15 and the 85, you know, and that's what you know, the little left fielder twice, you know, too far back, and then the right fielder, you know, just didn't do a good job. He dropped balls. He was out of his element, and I hadn't seen that kid play all year. Got to be careful putting kids in pressure situations who hadn't been there. You got me?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that's another thing you got to watch. So, you know, but it is what it is. You know, I don't want. My criticism is that I'm talking about what happened.
Yeah, no doubt.
People, you know, I'm only talking about what happened. I'm not talking about anything else. And you have to tell the people what happened. And the thing that happened is our little left fielder was too far back. And I'm looking. And Southern ain't the only one, but we're talking about Southern now.
Mm-hmm.
There were other teams, the same thing with Alabama and State. Their left fielder way too far back.
Let me ask you this. For a lot of people who may not have caught the game yesterday against Bethune-Cookman, Southern battled back and was up in the 7th inning. What went wrong late in that game to where they allowed Bethune-Cookman to crawl back and ultimately walk away with that victory in that elimination game?
Well, I talked a lot about the leadoff walk. When you walk the leadoff man, he scores 63% of the time.
63% of the time.
It's probably been 80% in the SWAC tournament, when you walk the leadoff man. Well, what happened, Burkett walked the leadoff the first two guys. And then the wheels came off because Crenshaw went to the bullpen and brought in number 30. I don't know his name. And he couldn't get no one out because everything he threw in there, they hit. And then, remember now, Chris said he had 6 on left he could use. Why didn't he use it? I would have gone to my closer, number 48. Saving him for what?
It's win or go
Tomorrow
home.
ain't going to come.
Mm-hmm.
My thing is, I would have had to use him to save the game and worry about tomorrow when tomorrow comes. You got me?
Mm-hmm.
You can only worry about today. You can't worry about tomorrow. It's not given. So my thing is he should have gone to someone who could have stopped the bleeding because that guy he put in couldn't do it. And I saw it happen with Alabama State. He wouldn't go stop the bleeding. He was worried about tomorrow. And you fool around and wait for tomorrow. Now you got tomorrow. You don't know what's going to happen.
Tomorrow,
it's sort of like picking something from behind the door. Do you take door number 1 or door number 2? You don't know what's behind either one. And it goes back to an old saying that the old people used to say, a bird in the hand is worth how many? More than 2 in the bushes.
Mm.
You never heard that?
I haven't heard that one.
A bird in the hand, you got it in your hand. It's worth more than the 2 in the bushes. You don't know what's in the bushes.
It's my first time hearing that one. I'm going to put that one in the bank right there. I'm going to remember that one.
It's an old-time saying, and it's very true today. If you got that bird in your hand, you know you got it.
Mm-hmm.
In the bushes, you don't know what's in there. Might be a snake.
It just might be something that'll bite you. Let me ask you this, because I also heard you talk about it. You just made mention talking about pitching and how important a pitching coach. But you were talking about pitchers overthrowing. If they just take some heat off the ball and just get it in there, you just seen a lot of guys just trying to sling it in there.
Yes, especially when they get runners on, they try to exert themselves and overthrow. You only gonna throw 80 miles per hour. Why are you trying to throw 90? And the pitchers that enjoyed success yesterday, they just threw the ball over. But they also not just throwing it over, they threw it to the outside part of the plate. They couldn't do anything with it. And if I can tell you how many championships I won as a coach, where my pitchers, we had them just throw the ball to the outside part of the plate. Watch big league games and see how many times they throw inside. Very rarely. They pitch outside because no one wants to make adjustments.
And, I was impressed with that yesterday with Bethune-Cookman because their pitcher late in that game was doing it. Coach came out. He made the adjustment. He slowed it down, and he ultimately got the ball where it needed to go.
Just throw the ball down to the outside, and the Southern couldn't do it. Gremlin, I saw Gremlin do that. That kid threw the ball outside, and Gremlin couldn't do nothing. They were pulling off it. And to Coach Pierre, he said, we got to make adjustments. They tried to get guys to step up closer to the plate, but guys were bent on pulling the ball. If you try to pull the ball in this tournament, you're not going to win. I'm going to tell you right now. The team that's going to win is the team that's going to hit the ball the other way. And I remember I saw Chris' team playing, I want to say Grambling. They might have been playing Grambling. And they were struggling. I said, Chris, Tell them choke up and step toward the plate. That's the only way. Nobody wants to make adjustments. Now, it's hard. This is why I don't get involved with Southern scheme, because I'm not going to be there every day to impart my philosophy, because you need someone there every day to keep telling the kids what to do every day. You got me?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's about repetition before they can buy into it. You got me?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I'm not one of those guys who runs over there and try to tell a coach what to do, because it's no miracle pill you can take and it's going to work immediately. You have to work at that stuff, you know, so you can gain the confidence needed to enjoy the success in a game loaded with failure.
Well, Coach, to get ready to let you go here, I know you got a full day ahead of you. You got some games to cover today. I've been listening to you, man, and I've been enjoying it. And, man, I'm glad to see you involved. Who would ever thought you was going to be a commentator?
It was all by mistake. You know, somebody didn't do their job and they asked me to do it. And I did. I've done 3 days of 4 games. And, I mean, you know, people say, can you do it? I say it's needed, and I'll do it. So.
Well, I appreciate you, Coach. I've been enjoying listening to you, man. Thank you for taking the time coming on this morning and giving that perspective of what you've been seeing. And I'm going to get you on here in the future, because as we get closer to that huge game up in Seattle for MLB All-Star Weekend, I want to talk more about with you in terms of some of the guys and the prospects that are being looked at around the conference that'll potentially be candidates for that game to be able to show off their talent for the next level, the MLB and everybody else to see.
You sound like a winner. I wish I had you with me.
Well, let's make it happen, Coach. All right. Hey, appreciate you for coming on, Coach, man, and have a good day. I'll give you a call a little bit later.
He said hello.
Well, he hear you. All right. Bye. My man, Roger Kadar, former Southern University head baseball coach, as well as, man, Hall of Famer in what? Louisiana, nationally, wherever you want to go. He's in every college baseball Hall of Fame, the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, all the Hall of Fame. So thank him for coming on this morning. We blew through a break, so we're going to go to a break and go to the top of the hour. Now, when we come back, my man Santoria Black, Charles Edmond, we're going to get them on. They've been calling the games at SWAC baseball tournament as well. We get a perspective of the other teams in the tournament as a whole and what's been going on in terms of the action. So stay tuned. You don't want to miss that. We'll be back more to Jaguar Journal.
Morning, sir. Actually, no. No, we actually didn't. Yes. Yes, sir. Yeah, I mean, the 9 a.m. bracket, the 9 a.m., 3 p.m. bracket, if you're falling in that, is probably the toughest bracket out there because you could potentially be playing 3 straight days at 9 o'clock in the morning. And Texas Southern, getting off to a shaky start. And I just think for them, not enough pitching, and I think that's the theme throughout the whole tournament. I mean, if you want to look at just 2 or 3 storylines the whole tournament, and even if you're looking at the teams that are alive, how many teams have the arms to be able to get through it? And I think you're seeing some high-scoring games. Florida A&M very well could be in the championship round right now. I mean, but they lost Alabama State and losing the league. But early on, you saw some low-scoring games, and it was pitching and defense early. But then as the tournament has worn on, you're seeing a lot more runs scored. I think teams are trying to piece their pitching together. And even, Roger Cador talked about this. It's just not enough pitching. Even the Power 5 schools are struggling to get arms. They're snatching them up out of high school. So I think right now, with the early matchups that we saw with obviously Texas Southern struggling, Florida A&M had a big lead against Bama State. They had a big lead and they let it slip away. So I just think early on in the tournament, you saw a lot less runs scored, but then the pitching is starting to waver a little bit, and you're seeing more runs scored as you get later on. Now, obviously, Southern University in the late game, in those late games with Grambling and Southern University later, I thought those were some really good games. And Centoria can talk more about those, but I thought the early games were really brisk, were really crisp, and not a lot of runs scored. It's a little tight, because James Crenshaw, producer, is right there to our right. Roger Cato, huh? James is. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think James is a pretty tall guy himself, and there's some other people in there as well behind him. So there's, let's see, me, Cador, Crenshaw. It's probably 4 or 5 people in there. I mean, but we make it work. The difference is that with the replays, I'm able to hear James Crenshaw talk with the umpires when there's some replays. So I'm able to hear what he's telling them, and of course, we're looking at the same thing the umpires are looking at, and so, it just provides good banter and conversation to try to figure out, whether the call was right, or whether it's wrong. Just trying to go over those nuances.
Well, day two, the biggest thing is that's when you start getting a loser's bracket. I thought that Jackson State probably had the most heartbreaking one because they lost by 1 run against Grambling, and then they got into that loser's bracket and then lost by 1 run against, I think it was Bethune-Cookman that they ended up losing to in that second day. And, losing late to Bethune. I think that's been the key there is late in the games we've seen where Florida A&M, for instance, I think it was yesterday's game or the game that they had against Alabama State. They scored 7 runs in the 8th inning to take the lead. But Alabama State, they were in the lead at one point in time. And, they ended up in the first, I think it was day 1 or day 2, when they get into the winners bracket, they ended up scoring multiple runs. And it was just incredible, So we've seen these runs that these teams have had late in the game, just scoring runs, and they're able to pull things out. Bethune-Cookman yesterday, when you look at what they did with Grambling, their pitching was incredible because they ended up only using 2 pitchers. And the name of the game is if you don't have to use as many arms, you're in good shape. So day 2 to me was really Jackson State losing another game by 1 run. That was a tough deal for them. Alabama State ends up winning a game late against Florida A&M. Those were 2 of the best games there because they ended up winning late. Yeah, I do remember the play. I mean, do you remember that, Charles?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it was a tremendous play from center field, and that's the other thing too. Perry, I think defensively we've seen some gems all over the place. If you watch the tournament from start to today, I think you'll see some great defensive plays in the outfield. I think what hurt Southern University, speaking of defense, and I'm sure you remember this, the drop fly ball in right field. I thought that opened the door. I think Southern had control of the game, even though they were able to sprinkle some runs out there. But that drop fly ball changed the whole momentum of the game. And I think that, when you're in a tournament situation, when you're in a loser and you're done situation, those little things turn the thing around. And look, but Bethune-Cookman, I think, is playing with house money. I mean, if you talk about teams that no one's talking about, and I've shared this story, Bethune-Cookman 2 years out of baseball. They opted out of 1 year. COVID shut them down another year. Their players were sent to JUCO, or they sent their players to JUCO, and those players came back from JUCO. You had a coach that was furloughed, worked at Amazon as a driver because he didn't have a job because they didn't play. I mean, so you're talking about the relentless attitude, and just nothing bothers them. And their coach is calm, cool, and collected. That's their team. So I think, they just don't get rattled. And I think, Grambling's going to have a beast of it today. But, everyone's on deck. I can't remember, Centauri, the last time we've had 2 games on a Saturday. We normally would have none. Very rarely do you have one, but how often? We need to check on that when we get to the ballpark. When was the last time we had 2 games on a Saturday? I can't remember.
Let me ask you this, because I saw Bethune-Cookman. Can you guys agree with me? Are they the slowest base running team in the conference? Outside of the teams that didn't make it to the tournament, man, I saw so many runs that was. It's just they could hit. They just not that fast on the bag. That's it.
Well, they don't necessarily have to do that. I mean, they're not the speediest team in the world, but when you've got solid defense and solid pitching, you can. Southern's pretty fast. Jackson's pretty fast. Grambling can steal some bases. I think Bama State, I think you would say that they're a station-to-station team. But, yeah, I would agree. I think Bethune-Cookman's they don't rely on that. I mean, they'll take advantage of it. But I think when you get solid pitching and defense and you put the ball in play and you don't get rattled, you don't need the speed as much. I mean, you would love to have it, but if you don't, you got to do those other things right.
Yeah. Santori, go ahead.
Yeah, well, and I'm going to add this with Bethune. I think that one of the great things about that team, what they showed last night, when you can pitch a team to the outside half of the plate and you can make them chase the way that they did with Grambling last night, the way that they did with Jackson late in that game, that really, if your hitters do not adjust, that's what they've done extremely well. They have really mixed up pitching well, where that outer half of the plate, where it makes a lot of hitters uncomfortable in adjusting. And we saw that. That's what really they've been really doing well. I mean, they held Grambling to 3 runs last night. And when you can look at how well they pitched in that ballgame, I think their starter had 118 pitches last night, and they only used 2 pitchers. So think about that in terms of today, to where now I think Grambling used 3 or 4 last night. They're going to have more fresh arms than Grambling will. And when you look at Bethune, they're probably the best pitching team left in this conference, or the second best next to Alabama State. But they're extremely talented in what they're doing. And when you start looking at how well they were clicking yesterday in both of those games, that's going to be a tough out now. I told Coach Cater this. What really made me nervous is if Southern would have won, I think Grambling would have had a better chance because their arms matched up as far as they really didn't have a lot of the back half arms in the bullpen as much as Bethune did. If Bethune would have won, which they did, that was going to really make me nervous because they got a lot of arms.
Yeah, Southern has been dominated this year by Grambling. Grambling has had their way when they played Southern. I was impressed you talking about Bethune-Cookman's pitching. Yesterday, when it seemed like in the 7th inning that game was going to get away from Bethune-Cookman, the bat started to fly for Southern. The coach came out, he talked to his pitcher, he calmed him down, and you saw a difference in the pitcher. When the coach came out calm, the pitcher calmed down, and Bethune ultimately regained their composure and got back into that game and won. And I was impressed by the way they handled that pressure late in the game. A lot of times that is a lot of pressure to handle. You're talking about that 8th inning, 7th, 8th, 9th inning to keep your composure. And I was real impressed from their head coach all the way down to their pitcher in terms of calming things down and getting the ball within the strike zone where he needed to get it.
Yeah, I think when you look at, just look at the teams that's left. The 3 top teams as far as pitching is concerned, Bama State, FAMU, and Bethune-Cookman. I mean, I think, I've been saying this, the East is more arm heavy, the West is more bat heavy, and I think you're seeing that pitching is ruling the day right now. And I think that's why you're seeing only 1 team from the West is left, and you got 3 teams in the East left. And I think, at this point, it really doesn't matter because you've got 1 game for your season, all arms on deck. But I think, Bethune-Cookman has been able to string it along. I think Alabama State's been pushed around a little bit. A lot of folks felt like, including me going in, that they would be the favorite. But Florida A&M has them matched up really well. They know them well. They know Bama State well and vice versa. They just played the last weekend of the regular season, by the way. So, and the games really didn't matter in terms of the standings, but that's a great rivalry that we're learning about in this conference. FAMU and Bama State, you know about Southern, Grambling, Alcorn Southern, but on that eastern side, that FAMU, Bama State rivalry is beginning to really heat up on the baseball diamond, and they're going at it again today. But I don't know which team Centauri's got the most arms left. I would say the AMU. I would say Bethune-Cookman. And you and I talked about Grambling. And so we'll see what happens. Which team has enough gas in the tank as far as pitching is concerned?
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point in that FAMU, that them and Alabama State, they have just been incredible. If you look at the two series that they've had so far, the middle games are the ones that FAMU struggled against. The other games, for the most part, they've really been close.
Did you say they have played like for the 8th time, 9th time this year?
It'll be the 9th time today.
Yep, 9 times.
So I had to bring like I think it was 8, then 9. Like, my God, that's a lot of times you've seen one team in a season.
Yeah, and you don't really see that a whole lot. With FAMU, though, I think what really helps them out is that if you can get those bats started, extremely early. I know Will Brown had a pretty good game yesterday against Alabama State. He got on base 3 times. You look at what happened just in that 8th inning alone was just, incredible. I think Sebastian Greco, he had a home run in that game. I mean, they really did a great job in turning things around. Even when they brought in Ben Kim, I think he came in the 8th inning. He got a base hit and ended up scoring a run. They batted around in the 8th inning. And with all of that said, Alabama State still had an opportunity to win because they batted around in that inning as well. And you had guys on the bag at the end of the ball game. I think you had bases loaded at the end of the ball game. So, that pitching is going to really tell the story today. Pitching and defense. Gosh, Bethune-Cookman's shortstop had some amazing plays yesterday against Grambling. We saw some great plays with FAMU yesterday at shortstop. So, to me, if your defense plays well and your pitching holds up, that's what's going to win the game. Yeah, of course you got to have the hitting, but I think we've seen the pitching and defense is what really has cost teams games in the tournament.
What's going on with the SWAC West? I mean, I think when I've looked at the East all season, I've had Bethune-Cookman and Alabama State circled. Those are 2 teams that I have liked. But then you look over in the SWAC West, Prairie View, Texas Southern, and Southern have been like right there along with each other, pretty much Southern and Texas Southern, and Grambling has been leading the way. But what have we seen in terms of the East being the more powerful seam side of the conference, and the West has fallen short when you look at competing for championships right now in the SWAC baseball tournament? And I'll start with you, Charles, and then over to Centauri.
I've gone to the tournament, and they all are saying the same thing here of late, that in the Eastern Division, it's more pitching heavy, and in the Western Division, it's more bat heavy. I've always believed this, but coaches, for the first time this year, when I talked to them prior to the tournament, they actually came out and said it, something I've always thought. So I think what you're seeing is that and on the Eastern side, you've got a little bit more arms that you can shut teams down in a pinch. The West, we know Grambling can hit. We know Southern can hit. We know Texas Southern can hit. And we know Prairie View can score some runs, even though they lost 1-0 yesterday. But I think the old baseball adage, good pitching beats good hitting. And I think what you're seeing is that in the East, they just have a little bit more in terms of arms pitching than the West does. And I think that's why, Grambling's been able to score some runs, but their pitching faltered a little bit. And so I think that's what you're saying. I think the East, and I think it's a little bit, when you look at FAMU, when you look at Bethune-Cookman, we know Bama State's good, but I think, a little bit of a slight. I think no one talked about FAMU. No one talked about Bethune-Cookman. So I think they're playing with a sense of edge because no one's really talking about them. I mean, everyone's talked about Jackson State. They went 24-0 in the division a couple of years ago. They didn't win the championship. The Southern won that. But I think, when you look at Bama State, they've always had the pitching. Mm-hmm. You look at their coach, Coach Vasquez. He was an assistant under Merville Melendez. So they've kept that template going. But I think for FAMU and I think for Bethune-Cookman, I think quietly they just get underappreciated. And I think they're showing that they're better than a lot of people think. And I think they have a lot of people's attention. But the West has always been bat heavy. But can you slug your way to a championship? I think what we're seeing is that it's going to be a struggle to do that.
Yeah, I think that's true. And this year, I think not only is the East doing extremely well as far as pitching, but you start adding what Alabama State has done. How many times have they, scored in double figures this year? I mean, it's just been incredible what they've been able to do. Then you look at FAMU, not really the best pitching team, but they've been able to score a lot of runs this year. So you start adding that, coupled with the fact that they do have a lot more pitching over on that side of the division, it really is starting to push Grambling and Southern and Texas Southern over in the West. And here's the other thing. Fundamental things that you don't necessarily see on the score sheet is what's separating some of these guys. Coach Cato brought up a really good point yesterday in that simple things like, why, is the guy at third, why is he trying to steal home at that point? Why is the pitcher paying so much attention to the guy at first when he's really not the guy that's going to be a threat to you at the end because he can't, doesn't have the speed. It's little things that are hurting these teams and some of the defensive plays that they've had. We saw a first baseman yesterday that missed an easy routine throw or routine catch to get a guy out, and that extended the game. Right fielder from Southern, he dropped the ball. We saw a couple of times where the ball got hung up in the air, especially during the evening time with Grambling, and they the ball ended up falling in front of them. Bad placement on one side. One of the coaches was talking to one of the players about moving over, coming back to his right. He didn't. They hit a shot down in left field, and all of a sudden scores 2 or 3 runs. So it's the little things that are also hurting teams because, at the end of the day, you make mistakes. They may not show up on the score sheet, but they end up costing you runs later on. And then, you got leaving guys on base. I think Alabama State, in the game that they had, I think they left somewhere around 7 or 8 guys, maybe 9 guys on base. That's very uncharacteristic of them. Grambling, Bethune-Cookman, even though they won, they left 7 guys on base. Jackson left a ton of guys on base. So, I think that's the other thing. It's the little things like that at the end of the ball game. You go back and you look at the score sheet, you remember little plays here and there. You remember little things here and there about guys left on base. What pitch did you take? Are you swinging, trying to swing for the fences instead of just an easy swing? All those things are mattering in the tournament.
Yeah, 2 things I remember Coach Kadar talking about yesterday. He kept harping about the outfielders playing too deep. And another thing he was talking about, one of the first baseman, I think it was for Southern, he said the guys playing behind the bag instead of in front of the bag. And I know those were 2 things he kept harping about when you look at those games and you go back. One thing I want to ask both of you guys, the teams that didn't make it, Pine Bluff, Valley, Alcorn, Alabama A&M. What do you think those 4 teams can do to improve, to insert themselves to ultimately make this tournament? Because I know we talk about so much of the teams that are there and the battles that we've seen since this tournament started on the 24th. But there's 4 teams at home that are going to have to regroup, lick their wounds, and find a way next year to get in a position to compete for a SWAC baseball tournament. And Santori, I'll start with you, looking at Pine Bluff, Valley, Alabama A&M, and Alcorn.
Well, you start with Valley. They're going to start from ground zero again because they relieved the coach of his duties. So, then you had some decommitting that went on with Mississippi Valley. So now you're really going to start at ground zero there. I'm not sure if they'll make the tournament next year or not. It's about growing the program, and it's about making sure that you have a level of consistency. Then you start looking at Alabama A&M. It's the same thing. You're in a division where the pitching is really, really good. They're going to have to go out and get some more arms. They're going to have to go out and get some guys that can really hit and that are solid in the field defensively. Arkansas Pine Bluff, they've struggled quite a bit. They don't even have, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if they have their full complement of scholarships still. That was one of the things I know that they struggled with early on. You can get 11.5, 11.8 scholarships, somewhere around there. And that doesn't mean that a school has all of their complement of scholarships. I think that Pine Bluff, they're really going to have to start recovering a little bit and getting some more back. If you're going to compete in the West, you got to be able to hit the ball better. They did a little bit, but they just couldn't. They didn't have the arms at the end of the day. And in the West, if you get knocked around a little bit and you start putting in arms and you don't really have quality arms, that's going to be a problem. So in Alcorn, look, they're still recovering from when you had a coach left and they took a lot of players with them. Charles can speak to that more than I can, but I don't think they recovered from that yet.
Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, well, I can speak on Alcorn for sure. Our baseball coach, Reggie Williams, he's been at the tournament. He's been kind of incognito, if you will, but he's been there. And but I can tell you that the Braves baseball program is on the right track. He's the right guy at the right time, the right job. Won 2 games his first year. He came in late in his first season. He came in August with no fall ball that previous going into his first season. We won 6 more games than we did the first year. A very young team. But he is the right guy for the job. Knows the game. He understands the conference now a lot more than he did the first year. So the Braves are on the rise. You look at UAPB, and you talked about Carlos James. He had some health issues. So last year he was not with the team. He's back, and if you want to talk about a team that was really playing well down the stretch this season, it was UAPB. Now they dug themselves too big of a hole. Mathematically, they had a chance to make the top 4, but they just gave away too many games early. But I think they're on the rise. So I think UAPB will be better, and the West Alcorn will be better next year. As Santoria talked about, Coach Barney, that I know at Mississippi Valley because he was at Alcorn when Beard Ray was the head coach. I really thought Coach Barney was the guy at Valley to be able to turn that program around, block by block. They were amongst the nation's leaders in stolen bases at the beginning of the season. They had two guys that were the top stolen base guys in the country early in the season, playing an exciting brand of baseball, stealing some bases, getting on and scoring some runs. So I thought Coach Barney was the guy that helped turn it around. Obviously, some things happened there, and he was let go. And then you look at Alabama A&M, another young head coach who was at Southern, who was at Grambling. They were scoring a lot of runs early, but they faltered. I do think, for the most part, the teams that did make it, with the exception of Valley, they'll have to start over. But I think Alcorn, UAPB, a veteran coach in Carlos James, and Alabama A&M, I think those coaches are the right guys for the job. I think they're going to continue to get better. And I expect 1 or 2 of those teams that didn't make it last year will make it this year. That will make it next year, I should say. So I think the SWAC baseball is in good hands. Obviously you got one program in Valley, it's got to start over. But I think you're seeing a different brand of baseball in this league. I think teams are still scoring runs, but you got to have pitching. And Roger Cador talked about that. There's a lack of arms out here at all levels. Mm-hmm. And I think, you're seeing that. And then the other category, Perry White, for Southern University, it was a tough way to go out, but they left 13 runners on base.
13 runners on base.
And so, that's a stat no one talks about. I talk about it on the broadcast all the time because when you look at that LOB column, left on base, that means that you're getting opportunities, but you're not bringing them in. Mm-hmm. So do you look at the fact that you're not getting opportunities, or are you getting the opportunities and not taking advantage? Southern clearly had it. They had 13 runners left on base. And, so defensively, they faltered. Pitching faltered a little bit, and then they left too many runners on base. And ultimately, those things catch up with you, especially against really good teams. And we're seeing Bethune-Cookman playing with house money, Florida A&M. We expect that Alabama State, and we expect Grambling to be there. But, you got to be able to drive runners in. And so I think, for Southern University, it's a tough way to go out. But I think you're going to see the SWAC conference continue to get better as years go on. I think, Valley's got to start over, but I think you're going to see some competitive baseball going forward.
And you know what? I want to bring that, what you just said, Charles, that's going to start separating a lot of teams because the brand of baseball in the conference is getting inherently better. The problem that you're going to start seeing is that you're going to start seeing the differences between athletic departments that invest in their baseball team and don't. You're going to start seeing those differences start to show up because teams like Alabama State, they're investing in their team. You take a look at what Florida A&M is. They've had some, they turnover in administration with their AD, but you're starting to see their AD starting to look and say, hey, how do we get this done? How do we invest in the program a little bit more? That investment, I think, on the baseball level is going to start separating teams as well because as you get better, the teams who are still maybe getting better on the back end, but if you're not putting that investment behind it, it's really going to start showing.
Do you guys honestly, and this is I've asked Charles this earlier in the year. But do you guys honestly think that the brand of baseball is getting better in this conference? I mean, for me, I think when you look at the miscues, when you look at the simple fundamentals, you just brought it up, Charles, talking in Santori, talking about Roger Kadar saying it's the IQ part of the game where guys are missing certain things that could help them as the game go on. Do you honestly think the brand of this game in the SWAC is getting better? And I would say, simply speaking off the southern part, because I have not looked at everybody's out of conference, but out of conference is big for me. Those midweek games, out of conference games are huge. Southern University, and everybody's probably sick of me saying it on this show, but I repeat it over and over. They've only won one out of conference game against a Division I opponent in the last 2 years, and that was at the beginning of last year against the University of Texas San Antonio. They literally lost everybody out of conference this year. That has to improve when you talk about the brand of baseball, so you just don't get victories against other teams that, as you say, in your conference, HBCU teams. But you have to go out there and get those out-of-conference games, those midweek games, to strengthen the conference as a whole, because you get a few teams that are doing better to beat each other and finding themselves with good seeding going into the SWAC baseball tournament. For me, doesn't make the conference better. It's just some teams that have gotten better than other teams in the conference. But you want to have your teams better when you talk about outside of the conference, when you're looking at regional and ultimately national brands, so these teams can get a better opportunity, especially when you look at seeding, once you look past tournament play and you start to go into these regionals.
Well, I think, for me, I think it does take more of an investment, number one. You have to have quality and quantity. If you look at some of these mid-major teams, let's just say mid-major, let's not even talk about the LSUs of the world that have the best of the best. You've got to have a number of coaches. You got to have more than what we have. And, let's just be brutally honest. I mean, baseball on paper collegiate baseball on paper is considered a non-revenue sport. So it's one of those situations where you don't generate a whole lot of revenue with it. How many of our teams charge a significant amount per game? Some do, many don't. And I think that's a factor in it as well. As far as midweek games and trying to generate revenue through those games, that's few and far between. And I think some coaches will probably back off of that a little bit because, let's be honest, coaches get fired based on what you do or don't do in your division. So if you're grinding out in midweek games and you got to come back a couple of days later and play a critical conference series, which is going to carry more weight for fans and for ADs. Yeah, you got to play the Texas San Antonios and the Lamars of the world, or the ULMs of the world, the Louisiana Techs of the world. You do that to get, and the reason why you play non-conference or midweek games, what we call them, the reason why you do it is really only one reason, well, two reasons. Money for some, but the others is the fact that when you get to your weekend series, you pretty much have your set lineup in place. So there are a lot of guys that don't get a lot of action in conference weekend series. So you use the midweek games to get guys in who don't typically play. That's a baseball reason. Of course, there's a financial reason as well. And you play in LSU, you're going to get a good guarantee. And you play some of these other top teams, the Georgias of the world and Floridas, you get those.
But it's the McNeese, the Nichols, the Southeasterns, it's those teams when you go out. I get when you go play the midweek game in Alcorns at Mississippi State. Yeah, I understand that, or U.S. Southern Miss. But when you taking on a UCA, a Southeastern, a Nichols, a McNeese, man, those UNO, those are games for me when you talk about the conference you got to bring home. But I understand what you're saying, too, the funding. Coach Kadar said it best. You got to invest in the pitching coach before you do anything else and then build around your staff from there. And I do understand it, but we got to because it seems like we just settle. And I'm starting to feel like that in all of our sports in this conference, to where we start to only settle for when it's time for conference games. It's like we'll play those out of conference games, and, if we win, we win. If we lose, we lose. But, hey, it wasn't a conference game. We waiting on Jackson State, Grambling, Alcorn this weekend. I just have a problem when it comes to that because I'm about branding and marketing. I'm about expanding who we are as the SWAC outside of the SWAC because
It feels good to brag about you beat somebody outside of the conference because we play the conference all day, every day. It feels good to finally say, hey, we did something out of conference. That brings joy and pride. So when we go somewhere, they're not just worried about how good your band is because they're not worried about your athletic program. That makes sense?
Well, it does make sense, but I'm going to say this, and I've said this on other podcasts and other shows. Name me one coach in this conference in any sport that gets terminated because of what they didn't do in non-conference.
I get it.
It's all about what you do or don't do in your conference games. You know,
the
we go 0-13.
Isn't the end of the season. You know, when you get to the SWAC tournament, we typically treat, once you win the SWAC championship in all of our sports, that's pretty much it to the season. It's not the beginning to get ready for the next part of the season, the championship part of the season.
I agree with you. I mean, I like the non-conference stuff myself, but unfortunately, we're in a situation where fans, and this is kind of fan and booster driven, they care about the big rivalries, the Bayou Classics, you know, the Alcorn Jacksons, the Alcorn Southerns, and that's what gets coaches hired. And if you don't get it done there, that's what ultimately gets coaches fired.
Yeah. Sorry, what you got?
Yeah, that's the thing, is that, you know, the midweek games are the games that help you develop arms. They help you develop, you know, the play and things like that. So when you're playing Purdue, Fort Wayne, you know, in the non-conference, or you're playing Stanford, or you're playing McNeese, so you're playing some of these other schools, you know, look, did you see the score of the Florida and Bethune game? I mean, that was extremely close, and Florida was the number 3 team in the country.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about 10 runs. We're talking about 2 or 3 runs that they lose that game by. And so we have to be careful about how we're, I guess for lack of a better term, how we're comparing ourselves to some of these Power 5 schools. Because, look, in general, how many schools, football or basketball, are beating a ton of these? Now, this year in basketball, you beat a few more, and you saw that. You know, Grambling beat Colorado. You see Arizona State you beat by Alcorn, if I'm not mistaken, or Texas Southern. But you don't see a ton of that because, you know, it's the investment.
I'm not doing the Power 5 to us comparison. I'm doing the McNeese, the Southeasterns, the North Alabamas. I'm doing that comparison of us. Not even the Power 5, just the teams that are right around the corner from just a little bit more or less than what do we have.
But the drawback of that, all right, so there's a risk reward with that. Yes, you're playing those other schools, but if you're looking at the financial piece of it, and regardless of whether you're playing them as football or basketball or baseball, financially, when you're playing those schools that you talked about, even in Louisiana, and I've always believed, and I've said this on other shows as well, Southern and Southeastern in football, and Roman Banks has talked about that. It's just, you know, from a financial perspective, you know the Jaguar Nation is going to pack Strawberry Stadium. Financially, what will that look like? I think it would be a great scene, but financially, you know, you would get, how much would you get out of that? So I think the financial piece is the key to it, because how much money are you really getting for baseball when Southern plays McNeese?
But we do play them, and we lose to them, and that's the part where I'm losing to them.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a talent thing too. I mean, and it's how much we really put into the midweek games. Not saying we don't care about them, because we do. I do. You know, I get excited when we play the Tulanes and when we play the McNeeses. But at the same time, you're also looking ahead to the weekend series too. I guarantee you, Chris Crenshaw and the Jaguars play McNeese on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. Yeah, they want to get through it. They don't want to get anybody hurt. But if he's got Grambling coming up Friday, Saturday, Sunday, he's focused a little bit more. And I know he probably won't admit it publicly, but he's focusing a little bit more on Grambling, trying to stay healthy, because that's the series. If you get swept, then you're going to get talked about. And then all of a sudden, Roman Banks gets calls and emails. So it's a tricky situation. You have to do it. You have to walk that tightrope. You hope you're competitive. You hope you stay healthy. You hope you win those games. But at the same time, it's about development. And even Roger Cato has said we shouldn't even be playing these midweek games. He has said that to me.
Because if we're not trying to win, we're looking forward to the weekend. I mean, why are we going to? We're not even taking it serious.
Well, I mean, I think we do take it. I think we do take it somewhat seriously. And I think if you look at, you know, the situation in Louisiana, the McNeeses, the Nickel States, the ULMs, the La Techs. I think if Southern or Grambling comes out and plays well and plays hard in those games, I think they can stick around and have a shot to winning those games. You know, we led ULM early, and one little simple error opened the door for a grand slam, and then we got beat by 11 runs. I mean, so those are the little things that happen, just like in the SWAC tournament. Those little things happen. But I think one of the things we're not doing in baseball, though, and I will say this because we kind of do it in basketball, we don't overschedule a lot in baseball. I think the games that we play in conference and midweek are manageable games. You know, Texas Southern, Prairie View plays Lamar. You talked about Southern McNeese and Southern and ULM. I mean, those are winnable games even in midweek if we come out and play. Now, basketball is a whole nother deal when you're playing the Michigan States and the Dukes of the world and the Floridas.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Different. But in baseball, you're not, because coaches aren't going to extend themselves like that in a midweek knowing that you got big conference series. So they rather would stay regional. They would rather stay local. I mean, Southern LSU makes sense. Plenty, because it's right there in town, right across town. Makes sense to me. And I think that should be, even LSU came to Southern one year, which I was happy to see. But, you know, I think for baseball, it's a little bit more responsible in terms of scheduling, you know, regional games, close games, where you get a little bit, you get a little coin out of it, but then you're also getting some work out of it, and you hope you can win the game as well.
You know, Coach Kerrick Jackson, former Southern University baseball coach, now the head baseball coach at Memphis, the reason why I instantly started to like him as a coach, in his introductory speech, first thing he said is, I want to win conference championships, but my ultimate goal is to get to Omaha. And whether that was a dream or whatever, I just like to hear coaches when it comes to our sports to dream bigger than just winning the conference, to where the conference championship does not end the season because you're going to go and probably go 2 and out, 1 and out or whatever, that we actually give ourselves an opportunity and a chance. And this is my dream because I believe in the brand. When you talk about the SWAC, it has rich history. It has some of the greatest athletes to play no matter what the sport, to come out of our institutions within our conference and to represent our schools. Now, do we do a great job at telling all of our stories? We don't. But the ones that we do tell, we hold on to. But we have to do better when it comes to the level of competition and understanding that outside of football, a national championship is obtainable. We have to be able to go out and find out ways. How do we buy into realizing that we can go after that national championship through investment, through loving our programs, through pride, but most of all, supporting our programs. And if we continue to settle only to say, well, the SWAC championship, and that's our national championship, when there's so much more to play for after that, we got to get out of that mindset, and at some point we're going to have to grow. The commissioner has made a statement, even talking about in football, talking about there's a possibility of us moving to FBS. And when I start to think about all of this culminating our brand and what we mean in terms of value and market, we have to be able to grow that value and market, not only within the teams that we play within our conference in the MEAC each and every year, no matter what the sport is, but outside of our conference, even when we look at teams that are right here in our backyard. Let's just take the Southland Conference. We have to be able to go out and perform better when it comes to that branding and marketing, because that's how you continue to increase it. Because these day and age, these young people, because of social media, the way that things are branded and marketing, they are no longer left in the dark when it comes to your school, when it comes to your athletic program and what you have to offer and who you are regionally and especially nationally. They pay attention to all of that, and they're looking at all of that. And I think that also plays a part into when you start to talk about getting guys and young women into our programs that are some of the best talent. We have to, in order to get them there, we got to increase our talent play. We got to increase what we're able to do outside of conference, and that ultimately would drive them in. And that's just me. That's my opinion on it, but that's what I believe in, because we play the SWAC. We've been playing SWAC schools since the early 1900s. There's no doubt about it. We know a Southern and Jackson, a Grambling Alcorn. It's no doubt about it. We know what those games consist of. They play each other year in and year out. But it's when we get outside of conference that start to matter, because you start to get the eyes of the people who may not know about Southern and Jackson, that there's a lot of them that don't. That you start to turn heads when you beat a team in a region that they've known about, and they say, well, who is Southern now? That's the part that matters when you talk about the branding and marketing for me, fellas. And that's the only reason why I feel so passionate about it. I'm cool with playing us each and every year, these teams that I know
all too well. We know them so well. We got family and their house divided because our families are so entrenched into these schools. But it's the schools we don't know so well that we got to go perform better about, because at the end of the day, all they going to ask me about is our band more so than our athletic programs. So,
well, I'll tell you this. I've been around the SWAC a long time, and one of the things that I noticed is that there is a great amount of pride within this conference. People love to play the Jacksons, and Southerns and Gramblings and Southerns and, whatever the case is, Alcorns and Jacksons. But the one thing that I will tell you is this. Charles been around the SWAC longer than I have, and I've been around almost 30 years. One of the things that I noticed about our brand of this conference is you have two major issues that have always plagued this conference. The first thing is the consistency in leadership. You do not have a consistency in leadership, then you start having problems. And look at what the commissioner has done now. There's been a consistency in leadership. The investment from the corporations is going up. The partnerships are going up. The TV contracts are getting increasingly better. Why? Because you have somebody that's been in there consistently. Now let's look at the presidents and athletic directors, just the athletic directors. When you start looking at the athletic directors, I think that you have people that aren't even there sometimes 2-3 years, and there's so much turnover there. Then when you start having a lot of turnover in the athletic director's department, how can you have that? See, we talk about the battles and why, we should be battling these schools and those schools and that type of thing. But if you really look at what those schools are doing, the level of consistency in their administration is been consistent. It's been increasingly better. So if you don't have that consistent leadership, how do you grow that? How do you grow that investment just within your own backyard and community? You want to talk about battling against the McNeese, battling against the Northwestern, battling against a Southeastern, whatever the case is, you have to start looking at, okay, hey, and even Southeastern's baseball coach, I believe, got canned this year, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. So if you start looking at the consistency in leadership at the top level, that's where you also hurt, because now you're going to have to reestablish your relationship with the business community to show that your program is going in the right direction. So I think that, you have to be fair about those things, because it's not just about just gaining talent. Well, how does that happen? You got to go out and have more investment. Well, how does that happen? You don't have an athletic director in there for 3 years and you're changing all the time. How do you expect that to happen? So I think it's part of that. It's the university's responsibility to invest into that. You have to look past football and basketball with that investment, and you have to say, okay, how do we improve in baseball? Alabama State is a prime example. Charles, you can attest this. About 10 years ago, before Morro Melendez got in there, if Alabama State got into the tournament, every single team in this conference says, oh, we got to win if we play in Alabama State. There's not one team that didn't say, hey, we're going to get a win if we play Alabama State in the tournament, because they were just that low. Look at what happens after Morgan Melendez, and now you've got Coach Vasquez there. They are the toughest out in most cases in every single tournament every year in in baseball. Mm-hmm. Why? Because the investment went in the program. Yep. And you can see it. Teams were actually canceling contracts playing Alabama State because they knew that they were going to get midweek games now. They were canceling contracts because they were afraid Alabama State was going to beat them. Who has more of a risk in losing that game, Alabama State or the team that's scheduled? Coach Melendez told me. There were a couple of years where there were multiple games canceled because the teams just didn't want to see Alabama State. They didn't want to see them. And so when you get better, you also are going to pay that price, because teams don't want to face an HBCU and lose. They'd rather go and play a Southeast and maybe lose, or they may go on and play a Texas San Antonio and lose. And look at that. Texas San Antonio, if I'm not mistaken, one of the best teams in the conference, in Conference USA, they go 2-0. So, you can have good teams that just don't play well. And so, I think you also have to look at that. There's a lot of things that we say we want to be the best. We want to be national champions and all this other kind of stuff. Well, it starts with administration and leadership. And it starts with the investment that you put into your programs. The more you put into your programs, i.e. Alabama State, the more you're going to get out of it. So I think that Alabama State, and even the coach from Florida A&M said this when he got the job, I think 10 years ago. He said, I want to build my program like Alabama State, because they compete, and they're competing on a national level. And they are.
Well, fellas, I've enjoyed this. This just made me feel like I was at the barbershop talking to my boy. These are the type of conversations that I love to have, because there's perspective to it. And I think to have these perspectives said, because a lot of times we don't have the platforms. A lot of this talk happens at a tailgate, at a barbershop, somewhere where you don't really get a chance to have these conversations where everybody can hear and chime in. And I love to have these type of conversations, especially from guys like yourself, like Charles and you, Santori. Both you guys have been around a long time. We're talking around from the Grambling area, the Alcorn area. I got a little Pine Bluff, a little Southern in me, but I've been around the conference a long time as well. But I love to have these conversations because these conversational pieces give you something to think about. I can take something from what everybody has said and said, you know what? I didn't even think about it like that. And that's what I love about it, because these conversations are something to grow from. Their think tanks. And I love to have them, and I'm glad you guys came on to have them with me, man. And I appreciate you for coming on, man. Charles Edmond and my man Centoria Black, man. I wish you guys success today. Y'all got a long day ahead of you. 2 games only, just 2 games. So, man, good luck to you guys. And y'all got to deal with Coach Kadar, huh? Charles, you and Coach Kadar go back and forth. I be hearing y'all, which y'all say little stuff to each other.
Well, Coach Kadar be giving Charles the business.
Coach Kadar is a jewel.
He is, man. And I thank you guys for coming on this morning, man. And I appreciate y'all, everybody that's watching the SWAC Digital Network. It is on YouTube. These guys will be calling the games. What games we have today, fellas?
Well, I've got FAMU and Bama State in that first game.
And Santori, who you have?
I've got Bethune-Cookman and Grambling at 3.
All right. So everybody, you tune in. Go to the SWAC Digital Network on YouTube. Check it out. Those fellas are right there, give you everything you need to get. All right. Thank you, fellas, for tuning in, coming on with me this morning, man. I enjoyed the conversation.
I appreciate it.
All right. All right, my man Charles Edmond, Santoria Black. Want to thank Coach Roger Kadar for coming in earlier and talking to me, man. Look, we've had a great show today, and I thank you guys for tuning in. Everybody out there on YouTube for commenting and being a part, subscribing, and everybody listening on 107.3. I hope you guys enjoyed today's show. That's the most I've ever given baseball, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hey, shout out to my man Casey on the board today, taking over for my man Mike. And hey, as my man Reggie Flood always say, if the Lord says the same, we'll be back at the same time in the same place, because always, it's the Jaguar Journal.